This is Engineer Paul Jefferson Vamani. Welcome to our introductory lecture for module number 11, Introduction to Engineering Surveys. This is a pre-recorded lecture video for CE 2131 Engineering Surveys or Elementary Surveying. Welcome to module number 11, Introduction to Engineering Surveys. In this particular module, we will try to explain the concepts of engineering surveys, identify the operations or stages of locating a railroad or highway. In this particular module, we will discuss how thus the designing process going on, or how do we do designing process when it comes to road construction, or basically horizontal construction or horizontal engineering. So in this module, the introduction to engineering surveys, we will have to cover some of the definitions of terms and some processes at which we start the construction for horizontal surveying. Then later on, we will have to do some computations involving horizontal alignment, vertical alignment, earthworks, and hauling surveying. So in continuation, so this is engineering surveys, or also known as the route surveying. Route surveying mainly defines as the supplies the data necessary to determine alignment, grading, and earthwork quantities for the design. How do we start building a road in a specific location? How many lanes do we have to consider depending on the volumes of vehicle requirement or the requirement of the number of vehicles that are passing through those subjected roads? Basically, in this particular type of surveying, we are enabled to identify the volume of earthworks do we need to do during this particular construction processes, and for us to basically quantify the design and the design and constructions of various engineering projects such as roads, railroads, pipelines, and utilities. Okay, in this particular module, we will have to cover what are the operations and stages in locating railroad or highway. First up on that is the reconnaissance survey. Second one is our preliminary survey, location survey, and lastly, we have construction survey. In these 4 stages, we will be able to identify whether this specific type of location or whether this specific location is susceptible enough for us to place over a 3, 2, 4, or more than 2 roadway or lanes for the specific volume of vehicles that will be passing through those highways or railroad, and how many and what are the types of curvature that we are going to use in designing those roadways. What are the preliminary designs that we have to consider, and what are the specific points of consideration we need to identify in considering such location as part of our horizontal constructions. First of all, that is, we have your reconnaissance survey. In reconnaissance survey, we have to cover some scope. In the scope of reconnaissance survey, provides an extensive study of an entire area that might be used for a road or airfield. Of course, before considering a specific location as your construction area or area for building up a specific roadway, we need to consider, is this particular location is what we need in building and connecting these areas? How do we need it? And are we going to are we going to encounter some problems along the way during this surveys, and so forth and so on. Its purpose is to eliminate those routes or sites which are impractical or unfeasible, and they identify the more promising routes on the site. Of course, in considering those roads, we need to identify the specific items or objects that will cause hindrance during our constructions or during construction processes, and so forth and so on. And what are those hindrance and what are those problems that we are going to encounter, and how are we going to deal with them later on. And for that reason, we need to also to consider the existing maps and aerial photographs of such location, possible routes and sites, and lastly, the summarize report, and for us to provide a complete summarize report about this location. Why do we need to consider those information? For the existing maps and aerial photographs, for us to identify the topography and the geometric figure of such location, whether this particular design of road is susceptible enough for this particular location, and how many lanes are we going to consider, possible routes and sites. How are we going to execute the design process? Do we need to provide a straight line on this particular dissection? Do we need to provide a simple curve? Do we need to provide a parallel curve? We need to provide a compound curve. What are the concentration are we going? What are the concentration do we need to identify on that particular locations? Then, of course, and lastly, to provide a summarized report regarding this specific location. And for the reconnaissance survey, we need to, of course, the designing conditions. In the design conditions, design and military characteristics should be considered during the reconnaissance survey. Keep in mind that the future operations may require an expanded road network. So how do we identify that? Based on the design process or during the design process of an engineering specializing on road constructions, they always need to consider that this particular road will always have to expand at some point in the nearest possible future, and so forth and so on, by considering the number of vehicles or the volume of vehicles that will use this particular highway. So first up on this first construction is that we are going to provide two lanes. That particular two lanes will now accommodate like 50,000 vehicles or 1,500 vehicles per day. But with time and with advancement of technology, the number of vehicles also increasing, of course, after 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and so forth and so on, that particular volume of vehicles will also increase. And of course, we'll have to consider expanding the location or expanding the number of lanes, such that adding another set of lanes or another two lanes for this particular highway, and so forth and so on. And later on, might as well provide a skyway and so forth. So on. Study on the route plans and specifications is, of course, very, very necessary. If these are unable or unavailable, use the following guides. First is for us to locate portions of the new road. So as far as it concerns that you have already built up a specific two-lane roadway, what are the possible section within those area or within that particular location are we going to consider or to dissect as part of the new expansion plan, and so forth and so on. Locate the road on high bearing strength soil. Of course, this roadway that we are going to build will have to support truckloads. Those truckloads are then designed during your theory of structures, or considered during your theory of structures on your strength analysis, that this roadway will be able to sustain or to carry 10-wheeler trucks or delivery trucks and so forth and so on, and that it will no longer it will not break or fail along during its construction, and so forth and so on, and that the soil should also be considered as well. Locate the road along ridges and streamlines, whether this particular roadway or highway is located along bodies of water, that those bodies of water may affect the strength capabilities of your soil as well as the construction processes. Select a route near to a material source. Very important is that the location that you are going to build your roadway is that very close, it is close to a specific source of which you are providing the materials for the construction, or area that is close to a well that might the well populated section, and so forth and so on. Locate the road on the sunny side of the hills and canyons. Then locate roads and forward combat zones. For forward combat zones, these are roadways that are being used by by military forces for, of course, for war, for distributing resources, for distributing military forces, for distributing military arms, and so forth and so on. But those are not those are some considerations being used for military forces or military considerations. Then select locations which conserve engineer assets. Ano ibig sabihin niya? Which conserve engineer assets. These locations are susceptible enough for us to place our heavy equipments or equipments that are going to be used during our construction, na pwede nating pasukan, pwedeng pasukan ng mga heavy equipments or ng heavy equipments during its construction process. Kung hindi or mahirap siyang pasukan ng mga heavy equipments, we will have to consider some parameters with some additional assessments. Now, number three is the roadway criteria. Here is a table for road specifications for the width, the grade that we need to consider, the site distances, slopes, drainage, horizontal curves, traffic, vertical curves, and so forth. And so these are some few pointers that we need to consider whenever we are deciding on the number of lanes and how big or how long a specific road should be built on this particular location. With the roadway criteria, we need to secure or we need to ensure satisfactory results. Study the build and if these are not available, use the engineering specifications of the road to be information provided in the following table. With regards to the width of the roadway, minimum roadway that are being considered are around 3 to 3.5 meters. 0.5 meters are a part of your gutter or a drainage section. Sometimes the 0.5 are being considered as the pedestrian lane for your roadways. And the site distances, absolute non-passing minimum of 200 feet or 60 meters. For the grades, specific concrete mixture if we're going to use a solid concrete road or either an asphalt. Then slopes, drainage, traffic, horizontal curves, vertical curves, which we'll later on further discuss or further elaborated under module 12 and 13. How do we design the curvature of a specific roadway? Why do we need a curvature on those roadways? And some super elevation with regards to the speed of vehicles that will be passing those curves. Based on the signages that you are seeing during your road trips, yung mga signages na yun, very important yun when you are designing the curvatures for horizontal and vertical curves of a particular roadway or highway. Then the traffic, for specific traffic, of course, the overhead clearance for 15 feet or 4.3 meters. Whenever there is an overpass along that roadway. So kung merong overpass, you need to set a specific overhead clearance or the height at which a specific vehicle can pass through. So, halimbawa dito sa Baguio, yung mga overpass natin, meron tayong specific overhead clearance doon that this particular type of truck can pass on those overhead clearance, and there are some specific type of vehicles that will not be able to pass those overhead clearance, and so forth and so long. Very important yan later on sa sa mga parking lots as well as sa mga overpass. Load capacity, turnouts, then traffic volumes. Traffic volumes, 2,000 vehicles per lane per day. So that is one consideration. So if we have two lanes, both of them should have an equivalent vehicle volume of 2,000 vehicles per lane per day. 2,000 on the left and 2,000 on the right lane of the roadway, back and forth. Then turnouts, minimum every 1/4 mile or 0.4 kilometer recommended. Then vertical curves, horizontal curves, and so forth and so long. Under Reconnaissance, we also have the collection of data. Very important itong ating collection of data. Either field or during computation, quantitative analysis. With collection of data, upon completion, the reconnaissance survey should support the routes. Routes are surveyed and provide basis of study showing the advantages and disadvantages of all the routes reconnoitered. reconnoitered. Why do we need to have those information? Whether this particular road is along the farm to market road, or along the commercial spaces, or along the residential spaces, and so forth and so long, or along to an open spaces. Very essential yan when you are considering a commercial business, or when you are considering placing a commercial buildings on such locations later on. We need also to consider the sketches of all routes are coordinated, and reports of feasible routes data on clearing and grabbing, and the number of stream crossings involving bridges spans exceeding 20 feet or 6 meters, the approximate number of culverts in span less than 20 feet or 6 meters. So whether there are culverts present on that particular location or not, and how do we have to deal with those particular informations later on. Then descriptions and sizes of marsh, areas, and other natural obstacles. Unusual grade and alignment of problems encountered, anticipated effects of landslides, melting snow and rainfall, soil conditions and stream substrata conditions at proposed bridge sites. Very important yung information na yan, lalo na dito sa Baguio. Very common ang soil landslide. So that's why we need to provide retaining walls on those sections that we are going to build our roadways. Those retaining walls are very much essential in sustaining the loads that will be caused by those landslide, para lalo na para magamit pa rin natin yung roadway even there is a presence of landslide. And how are we going to clear those landslide later on? Then discrepancies noted in maps and aerial photographs, which is in terms of your topographic mapping. Availability of local materials, equipment, transportation, and facilities. How do we transport the equipments needed during construction processes? How do we travel heavy equipment loads, heavy equipments whenever we are going to decide to build up a road on that specific location? And materials as well, of course, as well as your labor, photographs or sketches of the reference points, control points, structures, and site. Very common yan sa atin later on, kasi alam naman na natin yung ating basic elementary surveying. Ayun yung ating preliminary surveying, kumbaga. With regards to preliminary surveying, the locations, the topography of the area, the availability of people on the location, there are residences, commercial spaces, bodies of water, and so forth and so long. Then the use of maps. Under the Reconnaissance survey, very important din sa atin ang use of maps. Procurement of maps, map study, then classifications of routes. Whenever, if you have already that particular map on such specific location, you'll be able to assign or of course identify such section which is good for this particular type of road, with this number of lanes, and whether do we need to provide a horizontal curve, whether there is a necessary need for a vertical curve, and so forth and so long, as well as plotting the location at which you are going to start your road construction, and where we're going to place our pedestrian lanes. Are there specific residential houses that are going to be crossed by this roadway construction, and how are we going to deal with them? That is all based on the map that you will be having or you will be using with this information as part of our information or data collection. Next up is our preliminary survey. Under preliminary survey, its scope is to provide a detailed study of the route tentatively selected on the basis of reconnaissance survey information and recommendations. Based on the data collections that we have gathered from the reconnaissance survey, we will now start analyzing those information as part of preliminary survey. Then it runs on the traverse along a proposed route, establishes levels, records, topography, and plots. Result, of course, you will then have to start surveying methods that will analyze those informations or raw informations that we'll be needing later on for our roadway construction or roadway planning. It also determines the final location from this plot or preliminary map. The size and the scope of the project will be, of course, determined by this information or by this preliminary survey. The nature and depth of the preliminary survey for most military construction. Very important yan sa ating preliminary survey. This part of the assessment or part of a surveying process helps us to decide whether this particular location is susceptible enough for this particular project. And this particular project. And how are we going to establish our designs later on. Then the personnel. What are the people or how many people do we need? And what are the people or what are kind of professional or skilled worker do we need on this particular project? The survey effort establishes the traverse with control reference points, or it may expand to include leveling and topographic detail. Or how many geotechnical surveyors do we geodetic surveyors do we need on this particular project? How are they going to start the preliminary survey based on the, of course, the basic reconnaissance survey that we have gathered for them. Then the personnel should be composed of traverse party, level party, topographic party, transit stadia party, and plane table party, which of course very important yan later on in formulating our traverse surveying data, topographic data, level data or section data for vertical curves and horizontal curves, transit stadia and party for the number of lanes on that specific roadway, then plane table party. Next up is the location survey. After we have identified some basic informations or data collection, the reconnaissance survey, and assessing those information and starting to gather data regarding traverse surveying, using traverse surveying, level surveying, and topographic surveying, we will then now assess the specific location, or we have your location survey. With this particular location survey, prior to the final location survey, office studies consisting of the preparation of a map from preliminary survey data. So, ipa-plot na rin natin siya ngayon doon sa mismong on-hand map natin. So, after the on-hand map, ibig sabihin, ito yung map before the roadway construction. And what will be the look, how will it look like when there will be those there will already be that road that we're going to consider. Then projection of a tentative alignment and profile and preliminary estimates of quantities and costs are made and used as guidance for the final location or phase. Ito na yung ating investigatory location. So sa location na yan, ito na yung maaring itsura niya during road build-up or road construction. And what are the sections or ano yung mga sections na pwedeng maapektuhan ng ating constructions? Are we going to cross a specific residential area, and how are we going to deal on them? Running the center line with the location survey, running the center line may vary from the paper location due to objects or conditions that were not previously considered. Yung mga hindi natin nakita during our reconnaissance and preliminary survey. The final center line determines all the construction lines. The surveyor marks the stations, runs, and levels. Ito naman yung tinatawag nating stationing. So sa stationing, meron tayong specific length of road as part of our data information. Sa station na yan, first station, we have a 30-meter station length. So ito yung length ng roadway natin on the first station survey. Then the next station, another 30 meters, then another 30 meters. Then ganun din po yan sa construction. Bisection tayo, hindi tayo diretsong puring yan. So, hindi naman all the way through available yung ating materials at saka budget. Now, the center line starts at station 0+00. Of course, the starting point for our roadway build-up. The surveyor numbers the station consecutively and sets them at a full station of 100 foot or 30-meter station. Some uses 20 meters for uh, data considerations. Then with a running center line, stationing, with regards to stationing, example on the use of stationing, a station numbered 4 plus 44.75 would mean we have a 44.75 feet away from the fourth station. So meaning fourth station, that is at 400 foot. 400 foot at the fourth station, 400 foot, there is a 44.75 feet distance on your particular location, or the total distance of your current location from the starting station is 444.75. Sabi ko nga kanina, starting station denoted as 0 plus 00. 4 plus 00 refers to the number of station, and yung succeeding number na 44.75 refers to your point distance from that specific stationing point. So pag 400, 4 plus 00, fourth station, 44.75 feet or 44.75 feet away from the fourth station, or 444.75 feet away from the beginning or from the first station, or station 0 plus 00 from the beginning of the project. When using the metric system, the total distance from the beginning of the project would mean 135.56 meters, and it would be numbered as 135.56. Now, for reference stakes, the center line starts from station 0 plus 00. The surveyor, remember, the surveyor numbers the stations consecutively and sets them at a full station of 100 foot or 30-meter stations. The surveyor also sets stakes at important points along the center line. This may be a culvert locations, roads intersections, beginnings and ends of the curves, or breaks in the grade. So halimbawa, there is that specific location on our road build-up that we need to put a culvert or a drainage. Yun yung ating special marking or stationing marking. That point refers to either a culvert, a drainage section, or a tawag na dito, or a fire hydrant, and so forth and so on. This may be culvert locations, road intersections, beginnings and ends of the curves, or breaks in the grade. When measurements are made in feet, these stations are numbered from the last full station as 0 plus 00. For profile and cross sections, we need to prepare the following. First is for the road layout. Preparation for road layout, the determination of the elevations along the center line and laterally across the road. Basically, your vertical curves or vertical section, or as well as vertical leveling. Then separate operations for profile leveling and cross section leveling. We have road layout for vertical curves, separate operations for vertical sections, which is your profile leveling and cross section leveling, and intervals or station intervals for the plotting of center lines, elevations, or profile, or the points at which in our road build-ups we are going to be placing our culverts, drainage sections, intersections, and so forth and so on. Grade of the road for cross-sectioning, the volume of earthwork, plus stations. So hindi lang naman basta gusto ko sa location nito merong 3 lane ng road, yun na po yun. We need to elevate sections para maiwasan yung flooding and maiwasan yung tawag na dito, deep vertical curves. We need to tawag na dito, avoid deep vertical curves with that particular as part of our data collection or surveying later on. All elevations are abrupt changes or breaks in the ground are measured. with a road and level, and distances from the center line are measured with a tape. Silong surveying po yan lahat. Under construction survey, the construction survey scopes as the layout shows layout is an instrument in survey. It provides the alignment grades and location which guide the construction's operations. The construction's operations include clearing, grubbing, stripping, drainage, rough grading, finish grading, and surfacing. Ito naman yung ating clearing operations. Yung mismong construction na tanggalan na ng mga damo, ng mga tawag na obstacles, may, or do we need to put a tunnel for us to continue those roadway construction? Do we need to provide a horizontal curve? Are we going to cross a specific household? Do we need to buy that specific household or that specific lot for us to build up such roadway later on? Ito na yung mismong operations. Kung okay na lahat ng design, okay na yung ating locations, ngayon doon naman tayo sa clearing or laying out of the roadway. Ano yung mga dapat tanggalin, linisin, magkaroon ng embankment, dapat takpan o hukayan, and so forth and so long. Then alignment, whether there are a need for horizontal curves and vertical curves, which basically called as your horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. The surveyor must place the alignment markers ahead of the crew engaged in various phases of the constructions. The surveyor may do a hasty alignments marked by flags and rods suitable for guiding the clearing and grubbing operations. So, parang ano lang, imaginary points as part of our, saan na ba natin kinuha yun? As part of our midterm lectures. Markings. Those markings are important for us to lay out later on that the specific location needs a horizontal curves and a vertical curves and so forth and so long. Setting grade stakes and setting your grade stakes. Grade stakes indicates the exact grade elevation of the construction force. The surveyor consult the construction plans to determine the exact elevation of the subgrade and distance from the center line to the edges of the shoulder. Setting a slope stake. Under setting your slope stakes indicate the intersection of cut or fill. Ito naman yung sa howling. Do we need to embank soil on that specific location? Masyado bang malalim yung vertical curve niya or vertical alignment? Which will then have to consider embanking soil, which is also known as your fill. Embank, or do we need to dissect a specific soil on that location or on that hilly section for us to place that 2-lane roadway and so forth and so long? That is your cut and fill analysis. They indicate the earthwork limits on each side of the center line. How much volume of soil do we need to cut off on that specific location for us to build this roadway? Or how much volume of soil do we need to embank on that location for us to achieve this super elevation or this inclination of roadway to achieve later on a susceptible speed for vehicle to pass through or to follow and so forth and so long. Then we have the culvert location. Very important din ito, lalo na sa mga business areas that are being traversed by these roadway constructions. For roadway or for culvert location, to establish the layout of a site such as culvert, the surveyor locates the intersection of the roadway, center lines, and line of defining the direction of the culvert. Generally, the culverts are designed to confirm the natural drainage lines para natural drainage line. Part po yan lagi. Lalo na kung ang roadway build-up mo is along commercial areas or business areas. Place stakes to more and very important yan for rainfall inlet and outlet. To mark the inlet and outlet points in any cut or fill. If needed, is marked on them. Kagaya nung nandito sa ating pictures. Ito na yung very common type of culvert that we use in the Philippines. These are concrete culverts. for provincial roadways. Ngayon, gumagamit na tayo ng carbon and fiber type of culverts para mas mura tsaka mas matagal. Drainage to establish the layout of the site, such as culvert. The surveyor locates the intersections of the roadways, underlines and line of defining directions of the culvert. Some use PVC pipe culverts, concrete culverts, box culvert. Yung box culvert, ito na yung pinakamura at pinakamadaling gawin, lalo na sa probinsya. Ito yung mga lagi yung problema. Of course, may mga inlet outlet yan sa taas. Yan yung mga binubuksan natin pag mayroong mga bara. Ito yung PVC pipe culverts for roadways that are not either asphalt or concrete. Ano lang yan, compressed soil lang yung mga yan. Then we have box culvert. Ito na yung pinakamadali. Then we have your cylindrical concrete culverts. Ito yung pinalit sa Burnham eh. Ito yung bago sa Burnham. Mas malaki dyan. Yung nandun sa Burnham, sila laki ng diameter niya parang isang tao, 6 feet. Then, of course, you'll have your elaborate and evaluate assignment referring to module number 11, Introductions to Engineering Surveys. Maikli lang naman po itong Introduction to Engineering Surveys. Construction processes, planning stages for roadway build-ups. It will then furtherly discuss pagdating ninyo sa transportation engineering, lalo na yung volume count ng vehicles. How many numbers of vehicles are allowed to pass through on this particular number of lanes? How long before we need to expand or before we need to consider road expansions and so forth and so on. So I'll see you on our next lecture video for module number 5, starting with horizontal alignment or the horizontal curves. When there is a need this time on providing curves or horizontal curves on your roadway mapping or alignment, roadway alignment. And why do we have to consider them? So I'll see you and bye-bye.